This episode is an exciting one for me where I'll be talking about I'm going to see Sam Morril for the first time in the 3Olympia up in Dublin. Hello, welcome back to Al Talks. This podcast I started 3 years ago to chronicle me starting stand-up. This podcast is a weekly podcast. It comes out once a week, and this is just a small little introduction video into the podcast. So down below in the description of each episode, you can go to my Linktree and find links to everything connected to me. This podcast is available on YouTube, which you're watching on right now, and also on Spotify. But yeah, that is just a small introduction into this podcast and everything that goes along with it. Hello, welcome back to another episode of Al Talks. This is an exciting one for me. What the hell is going on with this? Okay. It's not been... There we go. Hopefully that sits better. And we're back. Well, I didn't pause, so we're definitely back. And we're back. No, but yeah, so this episode is an exciting one for me where I'll be talking about I'm going to see Sam Morril for the first time in the 3Olympia up in Dublin. The night before, I did a gig in the Cheeky Monkey, and that's next week's episode. And what? But yeah, so that was next week's episode. How I'm going to conduct this episode is I'm not really going to go into the jokes that Sam Morril was telling, because that's kind of new material. He's working on his next special. So if you want to see that, go see him live yourself. But a lot of the jokes that he mentioned on the podcast that he was riffing with Mark Normand, he did, which was great. Because if you have followed the podcast for a while, you will know that I really enjoy watching, jokes go from the early stages to the stage to the finished product. I really enjoyed that process. Very, very entertaining for me. And let's kind of circle back to before the gig started. I get to the venue. The Olympia is a really old theatre, and it has kind of like theatre seating. Like there's a Sam Morril called the when he was doing a bit of crowd work and riffing, he called it Abe Lincoln seats, which is kind of these balconies, tiered balconies that were on the side of the stage and stuff. And it's yeah. But yeah, it was pretty cool. But yeah, anyway, so I'm sitting in the upper but in the Olympia it's called the circle, and there's the upper circle, which is kind of, if you ever been to a theatre, you'll know it's kind of tiered seating all the way up. And then the bottom is usually the standing. This is my first time as well in being in 3Olympia for something other than a metal gig or a music event, so it was cool to see transformed into from a music venue to show a venue for a comic. So I get there, doors were 7. I didn't know what time the show was starting, didn't say any ticket, but apparently it did. I didn't read it properly. Whoops. So I get there, and then I meet a couple of friends of mine, fellow comics. So I end up sitting with them, and then another fellow comedian pops in from down in Cork. So we're sitting there having a great old time, and then the show started. The night before, 2 nights before the Olympia gig, Sam Morril was up in Belfast, and a local comedian called Shane Todd opened up for him. I've never met Shane Todd, but I look at his podcast clips from Northern Ireland up in Belfast, and I think he did about 20 minutes or so, and it was really, really fantastic comedy. Shane Todd has been doing this for 18 years, half of his life, which he mentioned on stage because he's 36. But it was, he had a particularly good act out bit in his set towards the end that just had me in stitches. He's a very, very funny comedian. Really enjoyed his set, and then it was like a 15-20 minute break interval. It's raining. And Sam Morril came on stage. So the show was kind of broken up, and he did, he talked to the crowd a little bit, and then he did his kind of new hour material. He kept apologizing for having notes on stage. He was like, "This stuff is new." And then he said, he goes, what I'll do is, if you have like any real life problems, let's try and solve them now, and I'll get you a drink." then the I found really, this is where the bit about the Abe Lincoln scenes came in, because this guy was sitting in that section, the Abe Lincoln section, and he was like, "Oh, I think my girlfriend's cheating on me." And the more we got into the story, so this guy is like, he's 20, he's been going out with this girl for 6 months, and she has this like male friend that they live practically 5 minutes away from each other, and every time they meet, he also had like his friends go and spy on this woman, but every time they meet, they're very, very touchy feeling. He thinks she's cheating on him and stuff like that. So that was one of the stories. Another story was a friend of mine, whose identity will be shielded. Let's just call him Mr. X. Me and Mr. X were gigging the night before in the Cheeky Monkey. He also had a fantastic set, really, really good material. But then the story he told to Sam Morril, which was, he was like, "Oh, I had a threesome with two girls, now I'm going out with one of them." And Sam was like, "Yeah, why is it like, that's not a problem, you're bragging." It was just so funny, because the fact that like I said, there's a lot of comedians there at the show, and like after the show I met Rob, and I was like, we were gigging together last night. It's like, where the hell did that story not come in? And he was like, and also Mr. X bumped into Sam on the street, and Sam remembered him from the night before. He goes, the funny thing is, like, I bumped into this guy, and afterwards I was talking to Mr. X, and I was asking him, I was like, what happened? I was like, I was like walking around city centre, and I noticed him beside the Trinity beside Trinity College, and Rob, well, his name is Rob, but cat's out of the bag. It's not Mr. X, it's Mr. Rob X. He ran over to him. He's like, "Oh man, I love you," because he seen him, and he was like, Mr. Rob X was very drunk, and he was. Then he ran over to him, and he was like, "Oh, I love you. You're a great man." And they were chatting. I can't remember if he got a picture with him or not, but he was like, but yeah, Sam was like, "Yeah, I remember. I met you in the street last night." He was like a crazy madman. So it was very funny. And then there was another guy who was struggling to pay his mortgage. He's like 26, works in finance, and in front of me there was a woman sitting there, and Sam was saying, "Any more kind of questions?" And she put up her hand and said, "Can you point out the guy who's struggling to pay his mortgage? Because I like live in the US and I want to leave." And she goes, like, "I live in Maine," and everyone was like, "Ooh, rough." And she's like, she's been, I think, masseuse for the last 11 years. And Sam was like, "Well, hopefully this will have a happy ending." Hee, if you know what that means. you know. But it was, yeah, it was a very, very funny interaction. But he asked her, he was like, "Why do you want to leave the US?" She's like, it's gotten really bad. People don't hug enough. And then Sam was like, this is really, really rough." Because there was another guy there who's like, that was another thing as well. In Ireland, if you're an electrician, like the kind of slang nickname we give you is Sparks. So Sam asked this like young dude who's just started working in a job. I think he's there like, I don't know, 6 months or so, 3 or 6 months. And he says, oh, his boss like picks on him, like, and stuff, like he just picks on him and nobody else. He's kind of new guy, gets like picked on and stuff, like. And a lot of people in the audience just shouting like, pussy, suck it up and all this sort of shit. And but yeah, so Sam didn't understand that. Like, he was like, oh, what do you do? It's like, what do you do? Because he thought he worked in an office at a construction firm. That's why he's being picked on. He didn't realize, because he said, oh, I'm a Sparks. And he's like, what? He's like, electrical. He's like, oh, like electrical, like a contract, and like you work in an office. And he was like, no, no, no. And he just didn't really understand it all. But it makes sense, you know, like they don't call them Sparks over in the US. So there's that. And then what was I gonna say? Yeah, so that was kind of another interaction. But he was like, "Yeah, this is like really, really sad." But he was saying when he was up in Northern Ireland, he found he was doing, you know, the exact same thing, kind of asking the audience if they had any problems, to try and solve them. But he found them very, very difficult to understand. And he said, you know, Dublin. He goes, Dublin is like, he goes, you're one people at night, during the day, and then at night you become a totally different crowd. He goes, during the day, you know, like there's families walking about, everything's fine. That at night, he goes, that like Monday night when he was walking around, when he met Mr. Rob X, that Mr. Rob X, that's very funny. By the way, Rob knows that, like, I'm telling this story, so it's fine. I don't think he's going to mind anyway. It's publicity. But it was just, and also public knowledge. Quite a lot of people heard it at this stage. Well, everyone in the 3Olympia did anyway. But so the young guy who was getting picked on, he was. No, where am I going now? I forget. I have lost my train of thought. I was talking about the young guy getting picked, Sam not knowing what the contractor was. I don't know where I was supposed to go. I was gonna look really bad in the footage or hear it otherwise, but whatever thought I had, I lost it. So I'm gonna go on. There was a dude in the audience who just kept shouting, wouldn't shut the fuck up, which is really, really annoying. He wasn't adding anything to the show. He was just shouting out random stuff. Oh yes, I remember now where I was heading back. But Sam was saying, like, on like the Monday night, he said, you know, just seeing a random person go up to somebody and go, ah. So for him, it was like, what's wrong, Dublin? Why are you like this? And people were like, because you're all just a bunch of alcoholics. You know, the stereotype that Irish are always drinking, which is quite true. They're one of the heavier drinkers in all of Europe and nearly in the world. And it was quite funny, the interactions. It was the somebody asked them about Bodega Cat, which is their whiskey that they made with his fellow comedian, fellow podcaster Mark Normand. And the other crowd interactions, there was the one with Rob, there was the 20-year-old guy with his girlfriend. And then, oh yeah, and after Jordan, kind of towards the end as well, Sam was like, it was like, let's just get a mob together and go down to this girl's apartment and figure what's going on and beat up this guy who's like, you know, feeling up your girlfriend and all this. And he was like, and then he goes, oh yeah, this is like, this guy was like, oh, I plan to do revenge. And then he was like, oh yeah, because, you know, and then goes, and then Sam was like, please don't mention the show as the reason for your revenge. He's like, no. He goes, Sam Morril, a comedian, starts a riot in Dublin. And it was a funny bit on a serious situation that happened last year up in Dublin, which was unfortunate. And kind of towards the end, the reason I mention is because it's old material. He did like 2-3 kind of old jokes, and then somebody asked him about doing If you don't really know Sam Morril, he gets invited to do uh, talk shows in the US, and he goes on there and he doesn't get invited back because he's very funny, but because they're live, they can't really do anything. So he kind of gets kicked off them. It's very, very funny interactions because a lot of most of the time, these radio hosts or these kind of people in television studios, they do no research on the comedians. They invite him in, they ask them stupid questions, so Sam fucks with them, and it's very, very entertaining. If you type it into Google, you can find it. And somebody was asking him, he was like, have you been invited to do any more? And he was like, no, because his publicist, he said the last one he did in North Carolina, I think that clip is up on YouTube. You can Google it, Sam Morril interview in North Carolina for some TV network. He said his publicist rang him afterwards. And he's like, Sam, what the hell is this? And he was like, but if you watch the interview, like the hosts were just, they were terrible. But it's just a funny thing. And he was saying that he was trying to get on one in Ireland. There was one that was offered to him in Belfast, but he couldn't, due to his flight not arriving on time. Not he wouldn't be able to make it, but how his flight was coming in and stuff like that. So it was kind of that sort of scenario, and it's still raining. It's not good. So it was that kind of show. I really enjoyed it. Considering what you hear about next week's episode, but especially on the Monday night, going off and doing the open mic, doing a bit of comedy before seeing Sam, and then Tuesday night was really, really funny as well. It was a great show, really enjoyed it. Shane Todd was brilliant, Sam Morril was brilliant. It was great to meet fellow comedians, talk a little bit before the show had started. Overall, a good 2 days up in Dublin, gigging, watching gigs, hanging out with comedians, doing the comedy thing. I'm just trying to think of any other crowd interactions I mentioned. The dickhead who kept shouting shit. I mentioned Mr. Rob X. Mentioned the woman from Maine. One of the first ones that he asked was somebody down in the seating section down below, in this kind of seating standing thing, and he said, "Oh, my friend thinks I'm a narcissist," and he's like, "Is your friend here beside you?" He was like, "Yeah," and then Sam was like, "Why do you think he's a narcissist?" He was like, "Oh, I don't know, it just is." And then Sam was like, "Sounds like both of you are narcissists." That was kind of one of the first interaction things. His old bits that he did was really enjoyable because they're from old specials. And what was I trying to say? I think I've ran out of things to say, which is kind of impossible. But no, on the particular topic of seeing Sam Morril live, I highly, highly recommend go see him live if he's coming to a city, village, town near where you, or make the effort to travel out to see him. Sam has started going to Europe recently quite a lot. He's he's flying out to Paris. He did host of gigs across Europe, Amsterdam, Belfast, London, Dublin, Paris, and then I think he's at Copenhagen and somewhere else as well. And I think he's I'm not sure if he's recording his special this year or next year. I think it might be this year. I can't remember what he said in the podcast. I'm also really looking forward to when he gets back to the US and he records We Might Be Drunk podcast episode about his trips across Ireland, and I'm pretty sure he will mention Mr. Rob X. we were talking afterwards, after the show, with Mr. Rob X, and I mentioned, I was like, you are definitely going to be mentioned on the podcast because that story is just too unique not to be mentioned. It was very very funny. I mean, like the funniest thing, like after the show, the woman in front of me from Maine, we kind of got talking and go, you want to hear something funny? I go, that guy like Mr. Rob Eggs. I go, he's a comic, he's a friend of mine, and I go, we were gigging yesterday, and I go, he didn't tell that story at all. That was very very funny, and it was really really enjoyable show. Like I mean, I was laughing quite a lot at all of Shane Todd's jokes and Sam Morril's new material, which, like I said, I've heard it, him and Mark Norman riffing on material, and then for it to come to fruition and on stage, it's really great to see that. Really looking forward to his next special. It is gearing up to be a really good one, like all of his specials. And I don't know what else to kind of talk about, really. I think pretty much we'll just kind of wrap it up, put a little bow on this, because I have to go and do other things, which I don't want to do, but we have to. But yeah, so this episode is my review. By the way, the European tour was called Sammy Takes Europe. So that's my review of Sam Morril, Sammy Takes Europe, which was very, very good. Highly recommended. And if you ever get the opportunity to see either Shane Todd or Sam Morril, definitely do. And also listen to their podcast. Shane Todd appears on a podcast as well with fellow comedians up in Northern Ireland. It is worth to listen to as well because it's very, very entertaining. Just like this podcast, very, very entertaining. 5 stars, TripAdvisor. No, I don't know how I would feel if people started rating this podcast. I think it'd be strange. I know you can rate podcasts, I suppose, like because I'm on Spotify, I think you can rate it on Spotify. You can rate my Facebook page, Alex George Comedy, on Facebook if you want, because it has a rating thing. I don't know if you can rate on Instagram. I don't think. I don't have a TripAdvisor or any of the googly things, so you can't do that. But yeah, if you want on Spotify, rate it, you can. Now here's a little secret as well. To try and entice people to listen to me on Spotify, because I don't really get a lot of listeners on Spotify. I schedule the YouTube videos, I don't schedule the Spotify ones. So here's a little secret. But I'm going to leave it in the end and not clip it to the front. So only the people who watch towards the end know about this. It'll be a little secret for you and me, won't it? Because I'm nice. But yeah, so, and on that, we will wrap it up for this week's episode. Enjoy next week's episode. The week after that, we'll come out with new content. You will get an entire month of scheduled stuff on YouTube. Like I said, on Spotify, it's not scheduled because that's my little treat for you. For a while anyway, until things pick up. Now it's scheduled. I'll become mean again. No. But yeah, so as per usual, thanks for watching, thanks for listening. All the links down below to all of my content and my fellow comedians' content, who you can support as well, because they support me through their friendship and camaraderie. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next week. Bye bye.